Crosby of Quincy Access Television. Thank you for joining us for Good Deeds, the Norfolk County Registry of Deeds. Today we will chat with the Registrar of Deeds, Bill O'Donnell, and talk about the registry, but specifically today we are focusing on something called the Homestead Act and mortgage discharges. So as in programs past, let me welcome my guest, Bill O'Donnell. Bill, welcome back.
Mark, thank you, and hello to everyone that's out watching. The Registry of Deeds, we're located at 649 High Street in Dedham, and a lot of times people don't know what the Registry of Deeds does, but it really handles documents and involves probably the biggest asset most of us have our homes. So all community land records have been recorded at the Registry of Deeds located in Dedham. The county was founded in 1793, and when you think of community land records, it's not just the deed to your house. It could be the mortgage when you borrowed money. It could be, later we're going to talk about homestead, or sometimes your governments they want the Board of Appeals decision or the Conservation Commission decision filed. So all those community land records get recorded. A lot of interests are preserved at the Registry of Deeds, but I think today's episode will be what consumers can do to protect the biggest asset they have, their homes.
We should mention that this program does air throughout Norfolk County. So quite a few counties within, quite a few towns, and of course the city of Quincy, within Norfolk County.
There's 28 communities that make up Norfolk County, as you mentioned, from the South Shore, Quincy, Weymouth, and Cohasset, over to Brookline, down through the middle of the county where you have the Cantons and the Norwoods. To the west you have Needham and Wellesley, all the way down to the Rhode Island border where you have Bellingham and Plainville and Rentham and Foxborough. So 28 communities that make up Norfolk County, and the thing is, you can visit the Registry of Deeds virtually, because a lot of the information we have is on our internet and on our website, www.norfolkdeeds.org. It's information based. You can look up land records, but it also has information about the homestead and mortgage discharges, and certainly people should go to the website if they need some information.
They are, of course, invited to call if they would like to do that as well.
And we still do it the old-fashioned way, and I attribute that to my dad, who used to climb poles for the Boston Edison for 38 years, people still want to talk to a person or get to a person. So our customer service center, which we created, the number is 781-461-6101, and you can call with any questions or needs that you may have.
That brings us to mortgage discharges, the first topic today, and folks will be aware of a mortgage. Quite a few folks have mortgages. Important that those mortgages get discharged, and we'll talk about that.
Yes, well, if you don't have a mortgage, I'm jealous, because most of us need mortgages. And what do we need mortgages for? We have to borrow money to buy our house. We may have children that are in college, and there's tuition needs. Some people borrow money to put an addition on their house, and so we always, have to remember to follow up on things. So the bank or the mortgage company, when you borrow money, is protecting their interest. You sign a note to borrow the money, and the lender wants to make sure they get paid, so they record a mortgage at the Registry of Deeds. And a lot of times that gives the bank and the lender certain rights into your property. Now, we've seen it more and more because we do have a customer service center. We do have a robust outreach where we go to the town halls and the senior centers and meet with people. And a lot of times people come and say, hey, I paid my mortgage off 20 years ago, and now I'm trying to sell my house, and I'm being told that I need a thing called a mortgage discharge. What is it? Well, when you borrow money, the mortgage gets recorded. What you want to make sure as a consumer, and this is a great point for consumers, is that when you pay off the mortgage, that a mortgage discharge gets recorded at the Registry of Deeds. It's usually a 1- or 2-page document that tells the world that you've paid that mortgage off. Now, a lot of times we're busy with jobs and families and activities, and we just refinance and we don't think anything of it. And why do people refinance it? Well, right now the interest rates are low, so people are taking advantage of low interest rates. Some people, because interest rates are low, try to knock off how many years they have left. Instead of a 30-year mortgage, maybe they dropped it down to a 15-year mortgage or a 10-year mortgage. Well, a lot of people just do it and then forget about it. And sometimes that's where the problems happen, because, and I feel bad for the consumers. That's why this is great that we're talking about it. The consumers are right. The attorneys and the banks that had handled your closing should be on top of it. And sometimes, and let me tell you, the banks have gotten a lot better. Small community banks, if you need a mortgage discharge, you just go down. They have great customer service. Hey, listen, I paid off that mortgage 20 years ago. A smaller community bank with that good customer service checks it out, and they could probably give you the discharge. And, the bank president's around the corner, signs it, and off you go. But many times, people just forgot to check into it, and they don't check into it till they're selling their property or refinancing. So what I tell people is, look, you want to check to make sure that mortgage discharges have been recorded, and to do that you can use our internet at www.norfolkdeeds.org. You can actually look up your mortgage and abstract it, and it will say satisfied, yes or no. Now if it says no, it means the mortgage discharge wasn't recorded. And again, you can call our customer service to get some help in this regard. And, well, what steps do you have to do if you need a mortgage discharge? Well, if you know the lender and it's a great community bank, and we have a lot of them around Norfolk County, you just go right down there. But a lot of banks went out of business. People forget that. A lot of banks merged. So if you go to our website at www.norfolkdeeds.org, we actually have information. And in fact, one of the information is, where has my bank gone? Because banks have merged or banks have gotten out of business, and we reproduce this when we're out on the road handing out to people. But you can go on our website and look up the information. We have links, federal and state website information, a connection to the FDIC, so you can track down your bank and where did it go. And it's not always easy. Sometimes people have to really work at it to get that document, and it's very important to get that document. Why is it a problem? Well, a lot of times, especially the bigger banks, and the bigger banks have gotten better because the Attorney General has taken action, as well as the state legislature, which has encouraged mortgage discharges to be recorded on behalf of the consumers. But some of these bigger banks maybe got a little sloppy, didn't send the discharges in. And in fairness, sometimes they sent it to individuals and just didn't make it clear that those mortgage discharges need to be recorded. So we've seen at office hours where people come in and I say, would you mind if I go through your documents? And sure enough, from 20 years ago, there's an original discharge.
But it wasn't recorded.
And it wasn't recorded. Well, it's fine. There's a filing fee. We take the filing fee and we bring it back to the registry and record it. You need an original discharge. A copy can't be recorded or a fax. It needs to be an original document. And again, if people want to check to make sure, use our internet land record system to check on their own, or call our customer service. But it's very important to get that mortgage discharge recorded. And again, you want to do it before you're in crisis. You hate to get that call. You're expecting to sell your house in 3 days, and the closing attorney calls up and says, hey, we need a mortgage discharge. And it does cloud the title. So people might lament the fact that the bank in the past didn't get the mortgage discharge to the registry or to them to record, or the attorney who was involved in the past closings might be in their file. But it's your house, and the burden is going to be on you because you're trying to sell it or get the lower rate refinancing. So it's probably best to be proactive and check on mortgages and make sure that the mortgage discharge gets recorded. And I feel bad for people because they say, I paid that off. I definitely paid it off. And it's unfortunate, but the world doesn't know it's been paid off because that mortgage discharge hasn't been recorded.
Well, how many people, just like you had said, actually have it on their person, but again, it was never filed?
Yes, and we've seen that. People, keep things in their strong box, but it's not insurmountable. As I said, you just have to. You have to be persistent, and you have to go to the lender, and sometimes it's easy to go to the lender that's down the street, but it's not so easy, and that's why we have links so you can find out where your bank has gone, and then you have to be persistent and get that mortgage discharge and get it recorded. And before we leave the whole mortgage thing, I would like to point out there's a mortgage assignment bill and that has been filed at the State House, and I urge anyone watching the show, if they could contact their state representative or their state senator, their local legislators, to support the residential mortgage bill. The actual name of the bill is an act to increase transparency in the Massachusetts land record systems to protect rights of homeowners and businesses, but I call it the residential mortgage assignment bill. Believe it or not, and we've seen this with consumers, your mortgage can be assigned, but the assignments aren't required to be recorded at the registry. And one of the reasons, and I have to thank Senator Keenan from Quincy, he filed this bill. It is Senate Docket 493, and it just got a bill number recently and was referred to the Judiciary Committee. It's Senate Bill number 1060. And Senator Keenan, said when he filed this, I am pleased to partner with Registrar O'Donnell again on this important consumer protection legislation that will help homeowners better understand who holds the mortgage of their on their property, which will help protect their most important asset, their home. So in other words, right now, again, we've seen it with people where they say, I'm trying to find out who holds my mortgage. I've been paying a group, but they've been taking the money, but I guess legally I have to find out who the entity is. And the reason we're saying file it within 30 days of the assignment being done is with the internet, the consumer could go online and just check.
It's immediate.
And it's very immediate. And the Boston Globe on December 8th did an article entitled, Can You Help Get Me My $20,000 Back? A Tangled Title Leaves New Homeowners in Limbo. And it was by Sean Murphy. And it was a story about these, the mortgage assignments weren't recorded, and it created a title issue. And the Boston Globe got involved, and it finally got resolved. But not everyone could get the Boston Globe to get involved. So I think this is a very simple way, just when mortgages get assigned, just record the assignment. It will allow the consumers to be better able to know, hey, my mortgage got assigned, or maybe, if it's 15 years later, you just look it up and say, oh yeah, that's the entity I got to make sure I get my mortgage discharged from. So I think it's important. I think it just facilitates a way for the homeowner to know who has an interest in their property through the mortgages. And Representative William Galvin, who filed this same bill on the House side, it was given House Docket number 991 and is now House Bill number 1576. He said this bill is a tool that will allow homeowners to track residential mortgage assignments. Filing the bill is the first step, but getting other legislators to support this legislative initiative is so very, very important. So I think the goal is to give the consumers, to give you as homeowners, a way to transparently and easily find out who's holding the mortgage to your house. So just urge your local legislators, again, it's Senate Bill number 1060 and House Bill number 1576, to support it. And it's been referred to the Judiciary Committee. Now, it's been filed before, and there are some interest groups that don't support it, but I think it's a good consumer bill. And as Tip O'Neill, who used to be the Speaker of the House here from Massachusetts, says, all politics is local. So anyone that's watching, urge your state senators and state representatives to get behind this bill.
Why would someone not support transparency like this?
Well, some of the, again, you could tell I'm a big believer in community banks. The local banks, the smaller banks, they're recording assignments, but you have some of the larger institutions, haven't supported it, and some people don't want. Some professionals. I'm a lawyer by training. I have no issues with it, but there are some lawyers, they just maybe don't want the. When you have obligations, you have liabilities. But to me, the consumer outweighs any concern about liability. And what's funny is in Massachusetts, there are two types of land here in Norfolk County: the land court or registered land and unrecorded. On the land court practice is to record mortgage assignments, which is currently done pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 185, Section 67. So
it's done on one side.
If it's good enough for 20% of the land in Norfolk County, it should be good for the other 80% of the land. So let's get 100% of the consumers to have, to be able to easily and transparently have a way to find out if their mortgage has been assigned.
Let's talk about Homestead, that being the second part of this program. That is a consumer protection device, correct?
It very much is, and it's been around for a while. I grew up in Norwood, Massachusetts, and my parents had a house. They didn't have a homestead recorded, and even though it's been around, the Homestead Act is a state law. It's Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 188. And it gives consumers, I think it's a very pro-consumer bill. And I mentioned I was an attorney. And I'm sure when people have gone to attorneys, there's a saying, you go to 10 different attorneys, you get 10 different opinions. But I would say 9.9 attorneys out of 10 would counsel or say a consumer should have a homestead recorded on their property. And what does a homestead do? Well, first of all, who's eligible? Well, if you own a home, you're eligible to record a homestead. A homestead is if you own the house as a principal residence now. It means different things in different states, but here in Massachusetts under Chapter 188, if you own the house or intend to live in that house as your principal residence, you have the right to record a homestead. And a homestead, you might think, oh, is it like the 30 pages of mortgage I signed? No. If you go to our website, www.norfolkdeeds.org, we have information on the Homestead Act, which you can look up and read, some of which we will be summarizing here in this show. But you can also download the form, and it's a relatively simple form. It's really a 2-page form, and the second page is really for the notary, because the signatures, whoever owns the property, has to sign on. And I try to tell people, what does it do? Well, it prevents the forced sale of your home. I say it's like putting a picket fence around your home, that it's off limits for certain things. People hear what they want to hear. Don't go down to Foxwoods and start incurring debt. Believe me, the people you owe money to are going to chase you. But what the homestead does is, and it's the biggest asset we have, it protects your home against certain actions, against certain debts, credit card debts, things like that, where they can't force the sale of your home. Now, they're going to chase you, they're going to file suit. I try to tell people what it doesn't do. If you don't pay the taxes to your community, your town or city can take the property by tax title. So a homestead does not beat the tax collector. We've talked about mortgages. When you borrow money, you might have a homestead recorded, but you know what? If you don't pay the mortgage, the bank or the lender is going to foreclose on you. So there are certain things like that where the homestead doesn't protect you. Doesn't protect you if you have obligations through the probate court to pay for child support. There are certain obligations that the homestead, you're not going to win. But there's other examples that I give where I think you'll see the benefit of having a homestead. For instance, you might be driving a car and you might think you have a lot of insurance, maybe $100,000 on your car, and you hit someone in the crosswalk and they get seriously hurt. They might have a $400,000 case. Well, that person that got injured is going to look to your assets. One of your assets is your home. However, if you have a homestead, it prevents the forced sale of your house to satisfy that particular case you're involved in. And you know what? We're always one bad decision or one bad luck or one bad incident away. So to me, it's really incumbent on a homeowner to take steps to protect the biggest asset they have. Biggest asset I have is my home. Get the homestead recorded. And it's been changed. The state legislature, there's always hearings going on the homestead.
You mean the level of protection has changed?
And other aspects of it. For instance, yes, when I first started as Register of Deeds, the protection was $300,000. It's been increased to $500,000. And it's not so much the dollar amount, because I think courts recognize when someone records a homestead, maybe the value of their house is more than $500,000. They recognize what the intent of the homestead is to make sure the sale of the home is enforced, that your asset is protected. But there's been other things, other benefits of having a homestead recorded. For instance, the legislature said that the proceeds from the sale of your house are protected if you have a homestead recorded. Again, basically a 2-page document that gets recorded at the Registry of Deeds. So think about it. If you sell your house and you have a homestead recorded, creditors can't swoop in and try to get the proceeds of the sale of that house. Now again, it's a limited protection in that case for 1 year. Wonder if your house burnt down and the insurance company gave you a check to rebuild. If you have a homestead recorded, another hidden benefit written in the statute is that creditors can't swoop in and try to go after that money that you just got to rebuild your house. Again, it gives, the homestead protects the insurance proceeds for a limited period of time, 2 years. But again, there's a lot of protections that are in the homestead, and the homestead's also been extended. If you own a manufactured or mobile home, and in parts of the county, down the southern part of the county, there are these types of living arrangements. You can also, you've been allowed, because there was some question, and they've directed that homesteads can be recorded at the Registry of Deeds to protect, your interest in your property.
Now in Massachusetts, there is a base level of protection, but folks can apply for greater protection?
Well, again, thank you, local legislators. For the first time in Massachusetts history, there is what they call an automatic homestead. So for years, I mentioned my parents, they bought their house in 1959 in Norwood. You would have to physically make sure that a document gets recorded at the registry to get the benefit of the homestead. But the legislature made some changes. One of this particular change was in 2011, where you get an automatic homestead. So if you own your principal residence, thank you, local legislators, you get an automatic homestead. But it's for $125,000, and it gets a portion depending on how many people own it. To my way of thinking, for a relatively modest filing fee of $36, because the filing fees are set by the state legislature, but they make sure to keep that one extra low to make sure that consumers take advantage of it. But to my way of thinking, I'd rather record my homestead so I could get the benefit of a $500,000 protection, plus some of these other protections that we mentioned.
So what about remortgaging, home equity loans? Talk about that in relation to the homestead.
Very good question. And I always draw on my personal experience. I have 3 children. We mentioned, people going to college and you're refinancing. Well, I refinanced. I had to put another homestead on because, believe it or not, in those, no one reads the 30 to 35 pages of mortgage documents, there was a clause in there that terminated your homestead. Other attorneys would argue it just subordinated it, but I always, when we're out on the road at town hall, say to the consumer, "Wait, why don't you read that one sentence? It's a one sentence. You don't have to be an attorney." And they're like, "It sounds like that killed my homestead." Exactly. But the legislature, and again, thank them, the effective date of that law was March 16, 2011, said if there's language like that in a homestead, it doesn't kill your mortgage. But remember, my kids are a little older now. I had refinanced prior to the effective date, so I just put another homestead on for a relatively modest filing fee. I didn't want someone saying, "Hey, when you refinanced, your homestead was terminated," and get chased, 10 years down the line if I got into an accident or something happened. So the good news is, today, in the real world, if you refinance and they have that language in a homestead, your homestead isn't terminated. But I urge people to check. If your homestead was put on before March 16, 2011, you might want to make sure that you didn't refinance prior to that date and have how would the consumer know? Again, this is what's great about getting this information out. How would a consumer know that their homestead got terminated, or they were just refinancing? So the legislature responded, to the registers and to other consumers saying, "Hey, this isn't right." So the good news is, when you refinance now, if you put a homestead on today and then you refinanced tomorrow or 30 days from now, and that language was in there, your homestead isn't terminated. But it would be well worth it for consumers if you're relying on your homestead to protect your property that you recorded before March 16, 2011, then you might want to, take a look at it. As I said, in my situation before March 16, 2011, as soon as I refinanced, I put another homestead on, because the protections are it's the biggest asset you have. So you just want to take that extra time and the extra effort to make sure it's protected. Again, it's no substitute for having great homeowners insurance and liability insurance and umbrella policies and things like that. But talk to your insurance agent about that. As far as what you can do through the registry as registered deeds, I would say to people, get a homestead recorded on your property.
What about property held in trust?
Again, another change. When I first became registered, there was a case law out of the land court in Bristol County that said that if you have property in trust, you can't get a homestead recorded, because a homestead can only be recorded by an individual, and a trust isn't an individual. Well, when I became registered, I took the homesteads on the recorded land side, but because that was a land court case, the 20% in Norfolk County, you had to respect the law. The good news is the legislature also saw kind of let's extend this benefit to all forms of ownership, depending on the situation. So if you own property in trust, again, you took the time to put it in trust, you may want to go back to the counselor or the lawyer or the advisor that helped you set up the trust, but you can now put a homestead on. Again, the trustee has to make certain representations, and there's beneficiaries. So it's a little more complicated, but the trustee would have to make representations that the beneficiary lives there as the principal resident. So again, it follows the same kind of script as someone who owns it jointly as husband and wife or spouses, or someone who owns it individually, that it has to be your principal residence. And as far as age, I would point out that the state legislature defines elderly as 62 and above, so there is an elderly homestead. But there might be young people watching. You might be 19 years old and lucky enough to own your property or own your house. There's no age. You should get your homestead. If you're 19 years old and you have a house or a condo and you're living there as your principal residence, get a homestead recorded.
In just the last minute, and literally last minute, talk about nursing homes and home protection.
Yes, the homestead does not eliminate those obligations. So again, much like the taxman or the lender, the homestead borrowing poker term does not beat the nursing home. So again, the big thing is to get the homestead, because it gives you great protection. Hopefully you'll never need it, but it's good to have. And again, call our customer service department or go on our website and check, because we've had people say, I can't remember if I put a homestead on. Call our customer service center at 781-461-6101, and we can look up to see if you have a homestead on your property.
Thank you again for another informative sit-down.
thank you, and again, if there's anyone that needs any information, please feel free to reach out to the registry.
Very good. Well, we'll see you in short order, I'm sure.
Thank you.
And thank you at home for watching. Please continue to watch Local Access Television for more locally produced programming.